The purpose of what I want to speak about today is Mafa and myth. As a disclaimer, I only want to speak for about 15 to 20 minutes tops. I want to limit it to 15 to 20 minutes only because I would much rather prefer for everyone else who's on to be able to share their thoughts on these topics so everyone can have an equal amount of time to talk. I realize that our Sundays are important days for us as we're getting ready to start the week back up on Monday. I realize that time is precious. You know, I have my 2 children and my wife downstairs now waiting for me. So that being said, I don't want to spend all the time talking. I just want to present to you some of the recent things that I have discovered. If you already know this information, then I just hope that it serves as another topic that we can discuss about and that we can learn more from each other. So with that being said, today's topic is Mafa and myth. And by Mafa, I'm referring to the Swahili term for the great disaster or the great tragedy. Mafa is often attributed to our enslavement or the African Holocaust, i.e. the transatlantic slave trade. This is just a term, another term for the transatlantic slave trade. So it's originating in Swahili. All right. It's describing the lasting impacts of and lasting effects on African peoples and their descendants who were enslaved. So that's what I'm discussing, the Mafa. All right. And by myth, I'm referring to, a widely held but false idea or belief, such as I chose this picture specifically as a myth. This is supposed to be a depiction of Noah in the book of Genesis in the Old Testament of the Bible. And as you see, the myth goes that Noah looks like this white man who could resemble someone from the United Kingdom or ancient Britain, right? But just to show what I mean, if we analyze the narrative, even the first Britons, such as we see here, Cheddar Man,
yeah,
the first Briton, dark skin and blue eyes, but at first they were saying Cheddar Man was the guy in the middle, looked more closely to him. But as more research came out, according to their scientists, Cheddar Man. So we can't even say that Noah was resembling a European man. So as we move further ahead, I want to just dig into some of the things that have been fed to myself specifically, and hopefully when we discuss it, if it's been fed to you as well, we can dissect it. Some of these things that are false, and not only false, that they were deliberately made or meant to deceive us, such as these cartoonish depictions of a pharaoh, and I'm assuming that's supposed to be Joseph, and they're in the land of Egypt with milky white skin. So today, this is what I'm going to be talking about. Mafa and myth. Being born and raised in Georgia, in America, and interacting with other quote unquote Black people, I want to say that in my experience, the Black people here don't look at our African brothers and sisters as the same. What do I mean by that? I'll give you a perfect example, right? Auntie of mine was going to get her hair braided, right? Her hair braided. She was going to the Africans because the Africans know how to braid hair, according to her. They braid hair really great, really tight, and really cheap. And so, yeah, she said she was going to the Africans. And so I asked her, I said, so did you tell them that you're African as well? And she says, looked at me almost with disgust, like, I'm not African. What are you talking about? Right? They don't look at us here from my own perspective. They don't look at our African brothers and sisters and us as the same. They look at us different culturally, linguistically, although we look the exact same, right? And so it's almost a resentment that kind of brews in us, being miseducated and indoctrinated here from a young age, especially when we get told these myths such as that the Africans were the ones who sold us into slavery first, that the Africans were our enemies historically first, that the Europeans basically inherited a system of slavery that was already put in place by our African relatives and that they sold us out, right? And so I want to dispel that myth today and pinpoint not just the white man for saying who's responsible for us, but pinpoint 3 individuals. I could have went forward with Mr. William Davenport, but for time's purposes, I only want to talk about 3 individuals who I personally feel like should be to blame for our enslavement, for our Holocaust, our dispersion from our motherland, right? I want to put to bed that myth that it is our African brothers and sisters who should be blamed, and then also not just stereotype another whole race of people, but to pinpoint 3 specific individuals. I want to talk about a couple of myths, and then lastly, I want to end up like, where do we go from now, which is going to lead us into a discussion, which I'm very eager to hear what everyone else has to say on these topics. So this picture here, before I begin, I have a very interesting, I don't want to really say relationship with slavery, but growing up, it was very much in my face, all right? Brother Lewis mentioned he did some research in Glasscock County, Georgia. I'm born and raised in Glasscock County, Georgia. 15 or so minutes away from Glasscock is Louisville, Georgia, which was the first state capital in the state of Georgia. And as you see on the picture on the left, that's a market house where our African ancestors were sold at. It's still standing today in downtown Louisville, still standing. So as you see, it's people, they've been trying to protest to get the market house removed because they said it's a constant reminder of humiliation. That's how they feel. I have my own thoughts on removing it, but we can discuss that as later. But I just wanted to show you real life pictures. This is close to my home, a market house, where our African ancestors, my ancestors, were possibly sold at, right here in Louisville, Georgia. This is a marker outside of that market house, which basically says the house was built between 1795 and 1798, blah, blah, blah. They record sales of large tracts, household goods, town lots, and slaves by sheriffs. So this is something that as little children, we would just see growing up. Wow, we were sold here. Our people were sold here. And so I just want to analyze the effects of seeing this type of things as well. Anyway, before, because I know on this chat, we've been talking a lot about slavery. Since we're talking about reconnecting to our people who we were disconnected from due to slavery. But I just want to throw a quick note from Sheikh Anta Diop in his book titled The African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality. There's a copy of it, Sheikh Anta Diop. He says that the memory of the recent slavery to which the Black race has been subjected cleverly kept alive in men's minds, and especially in Black minds, often affects Black consciousness negatively. Now, this is going back to what I was saying growing up in Glasscock County, Georgia, very close to Louisville, Georgia, and we see this market house with a bell that they used to ring where our people were most likely sold at. We see these things growing up, and we're often surrounded, we're often the minorities in these small counties in Georgia, and you just wonder, how does that affect us? Sheikh Anta Diop says it's affecting us negatively. He goes on to say, from that recent slavery, an attempt has been made to construct, despite all historical truth, a legend or myth that the Black has been reduced to slavery by the superior white race with which he has lived, wherever it may have been. So this is enabling whites to easily justify our presence and say ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia or Arabia or any of these ancient civilizations by simply saying that it's because we were enslaved. Saying that, yeah, we know that you existed, and yes, that we know that Africa is the mother of all civilization, but you weren't the builders of those civilizations. You were enslaved. And so I'm very careful about using this term, in that I don't want to put us in this box as if that's who we are. I rarely ever say my ancestors were slaves. I just don't say that because that's not true. They weren't slaves. They're human beings. They were kidnapped. They were enslaved. But just to put them in a box saying that they were slaves, that's what, from my experience, how they want us to think, because it kind of suppresses all of our ingenuity because oftentimes when I talk to the youth, and I'm saying the youth with me being 28, but the younger generations, they often don't think that they're capable of descending from people who built the pyramids, who invented mathematics and the sciences and the mother of all languages. They don't think that they could even descend from this great of a people. Why? Because all we see is that we were slaves. The movie 12 Years a Slave. Has anyone seen it? I love that. It was great acting, but I just wonder how many more slave movies are they going to make? How many do they need to make? As if they're making movies as if we can't, as if the remnants of that barbaric system aren't still standing today. We don't need to see a movie about 12 Years a Slave. Places like this market house close to my hometown are still standing. We don't need to see a movie of a white actor whipping the skin off a black woman or a black man until blood pours down, calling them Nigger and such and so forth, when it's very still present in our memory. So my question is, I wonder, why are they so adamant about portraying us in such a submissive perspective? Well, according to Sheikh Anta Diop, it's because they can justify our presence and blah, blah, blah by decreeing that we're enslaved. So it's basically to reduce us mentally after they already reduced us physically. Another quick note about slavery. According to J. Rogers, slave originates from Slav. The Slavs were Russian people captured by Germans. So basically they gave us their identity, and now they say that we were the slaves, but as if we can't research and see that their people were enslaved as well. Even in the US, which I'm from, white slaves were still held in the US up until 1825. How do I know this? Look at the laws. Act 5, Laws of Virginia, dated October 1670, where it says, no Negro or Indian, though baptized and enjoying their own freedom, shall be capable of such purchase of white Christians, but yet not debarred from buying any of their own kind. So they will say that their people weren't slaves, they were indentured servitude. And the only difference is that they could have a contract while they were enslaved and say, if I'm a slave for this certain amount of time, I can be free. Versus us black people, they were saying, no, you're a slave and your children are going to be a slave and it's for life. You're my property, just like a horse or a pig. So with that being said, as I get into what I want to talk about, who should be really blamed? This is important to me because I remember being in high school and I remember my history teacher specifically telling me when we were talking about slavery during Black History Month, of course, is when we talked about slavery, that it was the Africans who first sold the first slaves, that the Africans were already enslaving the Africans, and that system was already put in place by the time the Europeans came. So if you want to blame anyone, you should blame the Africans first. And I hear this echoed so much by my relatives, by friends, by people who I just casually throw this topic out to. I hear the same rhetoric. It's echoed out. And I just wonder, why has no one done the research to see who should really be blamed? So who should be blamed? The white man, or let's go more specific, who should be blamed beyond that? Let's look at Antio Goncalves. I'm charging Antio Goncalves with starting the transatlantic slave trade in 1441 after he kidnapped and transported 2 Africans to Portugal in 1442. He was the first European to kidnap and enslave Africans. I'm charging Antio Goncalves. I'm getting my research from a great book called something about Bimbia. I can't remember, but it's Bimbia something. But anyway, I'm charging him, Antio Goncalves. Here's my evidence. Antio Goncalves sailed the west coast of Africa in 1441. He was sponsored by Henry the Navigator. He kidnapped a Berber man and a woman from between Western Sahara and Mauritania, and then he transported them to Portugal. Now, this Berber man negotiated his and the woman's freedom in exchange for 10 more Africans that Goncalves could take back to Portugal in 1442. So 2 years later, 1443, Goncalves kidnaps 30 more Africans, And after that, Portugal was taking Africans by the thousands back to Portugal, to Brazil, to Uruguay, to Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago, Argentina, other Spanish colonies. But it was Antioch Gonçalves who first planted that seed. They said, we can take these people back, we can make them our property, we can enslave them for the benefit of our country. As I go further, by 1588, excuse me, Portugal had established slave trading centers in West Africa at Ketcheru, at Lagos, Warri, New and Old Calabar, all along the Cameroon River. So initially I said, I'm charging Antioch Gonçalves, who was starting transatlantic slave trade in 1441. And by the evidence that I just presented to you, by my findings, I find him guilty. That's just one person. The next person, and take a look at this picture. This is supposed to be the holiest of the holy. This is the Pope at that time. Holy man of the Roman Catholic Church. I'm charging Pope Nicholas V with using Christianity to enslave, to murder, to rape, and to kidnap African men, women, and children. That's a mighty charge that I'm charging the holiest of the holy with, but I have evidence. Let me show you. Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversis in 1452, followed by another papal bull, Romanus Pontifex, in 1454. Now, what these papal bulls, what this basically means is that he issued a legally binding document which granted the Portuguese king, Alfonso V, the right to monopoly to enslave sub-Saharan Africans. This is the document that I'm referring to, Dum Diversis. And I'm saying that with this document that he published in 1452, he granted the Portuguese king the right to monopoly and enslave sub-Saharan Africans. Let's look at what the document says. This is an excerpt from the papal bull. It says, Portugal, and this is the Pope speaking, Portugal could henceforth, with the permission and the blessing of the Pope, invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue pagans whatsoever, to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to take for himself and his successors the kingdom's possessions and goods, to convert them to his use and profit. The Pope granted the Portuguese king, Alfonso V, permission to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, subdue, and what the rest of the language says, specifically targeting pagans, i.e. sub-Saharan Africans who didn't believe in what the Roman Catholic Church believed in during that time. So he justified the enslavement of our people by a Christianizing mission of non-Christians. And for that, I find him guilty as charged. Those are two people. One more person that I want to bring up, Fernão Gomes, Portuguese merchant. He's important because he inherited this monopoly to enslave Africans from King Alfonso. So the Pope issued it. King Alfonso got the power. He passed it on to Fernão Gomes. Fernão Gomes is the one who claimed discoveries of the Cameroon territory in 1472. Fernão Gomes is the one who gave Cameroon its present name, Cameroon, along with Fernando Po. They also claimed discovery of the Warri Rivers, which was renamed in Portuguese, Rio dos Camarões, or the River of Shrimps and Prawns. That's interesting. And I wonder how long will we still call ourselves by a name that we didn't come up with? But that's something else that we can discuss during the discussion. But how long will we continue to call ourselves a name that we didn't create? Now that I identified 3 individuals who I feel should be held responsible for our enslavement, not our African brothers and sisters, but 3 specific individuals, I want to go into some of the myths that were also created. Because instead of seeking the truth, many of our people, from my experience, they would rather believe the lies and certain myths and blame ourselves than blaming the people who really should be to blame. And one of these myths is that I remember growing up as a child, I heard this quite oftenly: the curse of Ham. The curse of Ham. Has anyone heard of the curse of Ham? I'm sure you have. It's coming from the book of Genesis. I mean, the Bible, no, the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, chapter 9, verses 20 through 25. Basically saying that Noah was a man of the soil. So he was a gardener, he was a farmer. He planted a vineyard, so he's growing grapes. When he drank some of the wine that he made from those grapes, he became drunk. He laid naked inside of his tent. Now Ham, who was one of Noah's sons, saw his father naked, and he told his two brothers outside. So Noah got drunk, went to sleep naked. His son saw him naked, was probably laughing, like, ha, 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 told his two brothers, like, hey, dad is in here naked. He's drunk. Come see. So the two sons, Shem and Japheth, they took some clothing, they laid it across their shoulders, they walked backwards, and they covered their father's naked body. Their faces were turned the other way so that they would not see their father naked. When Noah awoke from his sleep, he found out what Ham had done, and he said, "Cursed be Canaan," Canaan being the son of Ham. "Cursed be Canaan, who should be the lowest of slaves, or the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers." So the curse of Ham stems from the belief that Noah, who built the ark, cursed his son Ham, all because Ham saw him naked when he was drunk, and basically he reduced him. He prophesied that he'll be the lowest of slaves to his brothers. Now they say that us Africans are descendants of Ham, which is why throughout history they say we were enslaved and still oppressed to this day. All right. During the Middle Ages, the Jews and the Christians, they considered Ham to be the father of all Africans. And as a consequence, the Westerners and the Islamic traders, they used the concept of the curse of Ham to justify enslaving us. And this aligns with the teachings of the slave Bible that I mentioned a long time ago, where certain white plantation owners omitted a great proportion of the Bible, and they only left in verses such as Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, do it for the Lord, and not your human masters, or slaves be obedient to your masters, and such and so forth. They indoctrinated us with only these things, and they throw in these curses to us, which obviously still has an effect on our people. If I was still hearing this as a child, they say that this is why you're a slave, because you happen to be the unlucky ones descended from Ham. Now, my final thoughts on this last curse comes from Sheikh Anta Diop, who says that if the Egyptians, such as who are our descendants, if they persecuted the Israelites, as the Bible says, and the Egyptians were Negroes or the sons of Hams, since the Egyptians were Africans, as the Bible says, then we can no longer ignore the historical causes of the curses upon Ham. Meaning that the Egyptians called their land Kemet. Kemet means black. Ham or Cham or Cam is loosely translated to mean heat or black or burned. And so what Sheikh Anta Diop is saying, that if the black Egyptians, if the biblical narrative is true, that the Israelites were indeed enslaved by the black Egyptians for 400 years or whatever the story in Exodus is, then of course that the descendants of Ham, who they, quote unquote, they consider us to be descended from, of course we would be cursed in the literature of the people that we oppressed, that our ancestors oppressed, being the Israelites, according to that narrative. So another myth is that the Africans began the transatlantic slave trade, which I already dispelled, but I put these two pictures up and one simple question: if we began it, who owned the dungeons? That's something that we'll discuss. So I'm closing in on my time. My final thoughts is, where do we go from here? And hopefully this can lead us into a topic of reparations, or what our thoughts should be in any, what we should receive in form of reparations. This is a website that I found that I want to briefly share with you. And it's a historical timeline of the reparation payments made from 1783 through 2022 by the US government, state, cities, religion. It's basically a compilation of all the reparations payments made by the US government from 1783 to 2022. And I just want to control F and just search Africa. So let's see what the US government has paid to Africa. And if you go through this, you'll see that it's mostly only apologies, such as in 1995, Southern Baptists apologized to African American church members for the denomination's endorsement of slavery. All right. 2008, it was a formal apology made to the African American community for centuries of brutal dehumanization. Apologies. Georgetown acknowledged that they profited from the sale of slaves, and they named 2 buildings after African Americans and offered preferred admission to any descendants of slaves who worked at the university. But where's the money? Students at Georgetown voted to increase their tuition to benefit descendants of 272 enslaved Africans. But where's the money? So as we go through and just look for Africa, let's see. So my question is, should we be holding our breath as far as reparations goes? And if not, where should we go from here? And with that being said, that concludes my brief presentation. As I said, I really wanted to just share my findings with you and give everyone else the opportunity to speak on their thoughts on some of the topics that I introduced. And hopefully this will allow a constructive dialogue that will allow us to learn from each other and maybe pick up on some things that we didn't know previously. So with that being said, I thank you for your time, your attention, and I will now open it up to anyone who wants to go first and contribute to the conversation. I saw Brother Lewis was taking notes, so feel free. Thank you. Go Peno.
Yes, I'd like to address.
Go ahead, Brother Tata, go ahead.
Oh, good enough then. All right. I can go after you. It's no big deal. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, brother. You go ahead,
Okay.
please.
Am I able to share a screen? Do I have the permission to share a screen or no? Yes, no.
Sure, you can. Let me just.
Okay, good. Okay, good enough then. I wanted to backtrack a little bit. You looked at things in terms of linguistic, things of culturally, and things in terms of Africans in this case. Now, at that time period, people did not think of themselves as being African, not in the way that we understand it today. All right, then that was you have your Wolof, you have your Bambara, you have your Zulu. These are the terminologies that were being used at that time period to describe themselves in this case here, even in terms of naming. So in terms of saying that Africans sold Africans, that could be very much an area that is yes and no at the same time. You have those that showed up with guns and a Bible, so they had to be sold out. You had those that were on a pilgrimage someplace, they were caught and sold out. You have those who traditionally, if you lost of war, you would be indentured, not necessarily enslaved in terms of how the Eurocentric mindset understands the word enslavement. Europeans were already enslaving themselves well before they had their own concept of enslavement, and not just enslavement, actually full out slavery, before they even got to the continent in the first place. Secondly, part of the reason, the push for them to go into Africa was labor. There was a bubonic plague in the early 1300s that wiped out about a third of the European population. And as they pushed out to look into the world to find other things, they didn't have the labor to do so. So they tried to export themselves over to the quote unquote new world. They could not do so. it became difficult because there just wasn't enough of them to do across the board. This not only hit England and France, but it also hit Spain and Portugal. At one point in time, Portugal and Spain were together under one kingdom, and then they split. All right. So at the time period when you have Gonzalez, that was there, I believe at that time he was still under. I think they were still under Spanish rule, or let's say Spanish Portuguese kingdom in this case. However, it did break up, and so now you have a definitive Portuguese and a definitive Spanish, i.e., Castilian, because you're still in that early time period. Spain is still being ruled by Al-Andalus, which is the Islamic part. All right, then they don't really fully go down completely until 1492 with the fall of Granada and Cordoba, etc., when King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel finally come into fruition. So before that time period, it's still dominating under Islamic rule, the time period. So that's one thing. In terms of linguistics, let me share the screen, because you said that we've lost some linguistics, and I would beg to differ, not necessarily that, but here it is right here. We've got some Africanisms in contemporary English. These Africanisms in contemporary English may refer to direct modern borrowings or loans from African languages or intergenerational inheritance from past borrowings. We've got the cultural linguistic contact is at the root of Africanisms in contemporary English and may occur in areas including but not limited to syntax, morphology, phonology, phonetics, and pragmatics in this case here. Let's see here. I'm going to skip down here. First, there's what we call Ebonics. First, Ebonics, derived ultimately from African languages, shows the greatest degree of Africanisms by virtue of this fact. Second, Ebonics through vehicles such as rap, hip hop, rhythm, and blues, jazz, the rocks, blues, rock and roll, field songs, and ring shouts has been and tends to be one of the most innovative and influential documented contributors to what ends up eventually being incorporated into CE, current English in this case here, or mainstream American, standard American English. We've got preposition as final interrogatives, resumptive pronoun structures, resumptive with, multiple negation. I know not what he doing, in this case here. What you be doing? That is an African context right there. Genitive marking structures and agreement marking. Here are some examples in this case here. Where she at? Where you be at? Now, this uses parallel structures in African languages such as Akan, Yoruba, and Wolof. Niboloa. Where? Where it be? The located right there. Where he at? Where she at? Where she be? Where he be? Next one, you have an Okan. Ehefana'o. Where? Where she at? Where is she? And Wolof. Fan mo nke. Where? And in this case here, where she at? Where is he or she at? Notice that the construction in terms of the African language structure between Akan, Wolof, and Yoruba and Ebonics, it's almost in the same format. Where and she, which is the focal, the subject, and then at meaning the location. So as resumptive pronoun, Tyrone, he always be getting in trouble. Tyrone always gets into trouble. The addition of the optional him to the end of the utterance is something found to be particularly regular among Texans in the United States. For example, it is most directly correlated to Wolof type structures such as shown in 9 and 10. This man do good work. Men work good. This man works very hard. The elder drinks wine. The king arrives at the house. King arrive house. So you get my point right here, is that a lot of our own diction has carried over into what they call Ebonics at this time period. When you listen to rap, that is a complete African structure in this case. This is how it works. You just can't do it any other way. This paper was penned with by Obadele Cambon. Here it is. There's another one. He always be trying to holler at somebody with his hot breath. Here's another one. See there? That's why you tripped with your stuck-up self. And this is this sentence structure is almost very much the same with Akan and in many different African languages. I hope that's making sense, everyone. Let me stop.
Brother Lewis, you're muted.
Can you hear me? I got kicked out right there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me now?
That's the first.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Young brother, where are you from?
Well,
Are you teaching at a university or something? Or is that your major?
I teach at the university and teach secondary school.
Where?
One in London and here in Spain.
Okay. I like what you're doing. Seriously, thinking very seriously about having you to do a Zoom, either locally or nationally, with the Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society.
Okay.
So before we leave today, just be sure I get all of your particulars, how to contact you.
Okay, no problem.
Whether we do it Zoom, whether you're going to be traveling sometime in the future in the U.S., or perhaps if we need to bring you here for one of our national conferences.
Okay.
I like what you're doing. I hear what you're doing. It's something that is very, very much needed. I think we tend to not recognize those languages and syntax that you're talking about, and how they fit culturally, how they're part of African linguistics that fit right into African American speech. So yeah, and actually now when I go out among especially the young brothers, I will listen more carefully and more intently as they talk to pick up. And I'm 81 years old, but I can go back to my own early days and hear some of the same sounds, hard-headedness and all that kind of stuff in my home. I mean, my great-great-grandmother, who I lived with until I was 19, was born a few years after the emancipation. So I'm sure I heard a lot of things that I never understood, that I took for granted, and thought that was just an old lady from the South talking. So yeah, I want to be sure. If I don't, Brother Mark, I'll contact you to get this young man's. Hope you don't at 81 don't mind me calling you young man.
No. That's fine. That's fine.
His contact, and have you to do a Zoom. If you can, at some point in time, provide me with just a snippet of your PowerPoint, just enough to trigger the appetite for some groups. I would appreciate that. I'm gonna throw it back, but I didn't want to forget. While I was thinking, I needed to really tie into that, something that's much needed, and I think would be something new and something welcome for my colleagues here. Yeah, well.
Then I'm going to make two more points, and I'll pass the mic. Culturally, in terms of culturally, how we raised our children. Okay, this is the generation in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. How we raised our children culturally in order to understand that you didn't mess with a big mama. And how do we say great grandmother in Fe'efe? We say what? How do we say this? How do we say grandmother? Mvo Ndama. That literally means big mother in this case here. How do you think we got that terminology, big mama? Everyone had a big mama around. I had a big mama. Everyone had a big mama. Okay, then that's how it is. We didn't say, maybe we said granny would have you at time to time, but everyone had a big mama. Where's big mama at in this case? So we had that. In terms of cooking, you'd be surprised just how close related our cooking is from West Africa. Look how we prepare our rice. We can't eat anything without having some kind of hot stuff in it. So for the most part, we got to have some spices in it. You know, we don't like anything dull or bland. Look at every single dish that we usually have is going to have some hot sauce or some pepper in it, or something that's going to give it some spice and kick to it. That's how it goes. That's it. That is, it doesn't get any more culturally continuity. Yes, we may have to have used a few different ingredients because of the locale that we're in, but the desire to have something that has some spice to it is consistent with that. Let's see here. Our dance. Look at that. I mean, it doesn't matter if you grew up in Georgia or Louisiana or if you grew up in Senegal. If you take a black girl from the most impoverished area of the ghetto in Georgia and place her in Africa and tell her to dance, she will get down with it. Not only will she get down with it, she'll learn that stuff with no big darn deal because she got rhythm. It's in her blood. So we carried our dances over. We may not pronounce it, we may not announce it, we may not even completely say that this is our thing, but that's exactly what that is. Now, in terms of the three people that Memo Tahnko said about blaming the cause of this, I would then, of course, take this a bit further, and I would take a look at Mansa Musa. This man took this, he took from one part of Africa, Mali, all the way up. And what did he bring with him? He brought his entourage and people that were indentured, quote unquote, enslaved to a certain degree. And what do you think people may have gotten the idea after returning back with all those people? There must be a lot of people to go and get. So people don't necessarily attribute to that because it has been reported that he did crash the economic system because of all the gold he was just putting out there on a regular basis. So what do you think people from the north, because that's what they are to us, or northerners, what do you think, what sort of idea may they have gotten? Is there's a lot of people and there's riches to be found, major riches to be found. So as Europe got blocked from the trade toward the east with China, they were looking for new routes into India. And please do not forget that Christopher Columbus died in his ignorance thinking that he had actually reached India. They were out there looking for John Prester. That's what they were out looking for, Prester. Prester John, not John, but Prester John, the illustrious Prester John, somewhere in East Africa that was Christian, quote unquote, referring that to India. He never made it to India. So some of the causes, the direct causes obviously would be the Pope and his passing of his the papal bull, obviously. The financing of such a thing, continuous financing, while the indigenous peoples, the cultural linguistic groups were fighting amongst themselves. Europe had calmed down a little bit because of the bubonic plague. So there's barely anybody around. So they're able to consolidate themselves, build shipbuilding back and forth. Because where do you think these guys got their information from? Right there in Spain, going straight down into Morocco, going straight down into West Africa, because they were the ones with the most amount of information at the time period. So this information came from Persia, from the east, flowing way through North Africa, basically into Kemet, making its way over into the Caliphate, all into Spain, and the information rested there. A lot of it rested right there. So by the time Europe came out of its quote unquote dark ages, they just had to go and pull this information, go down and learn how to shipbuild. And then they were able to start taking people back and forth. So you've got that, plus you got financing. So I would say that these three people were the igniter of these things, and they opened the door. The rest of it took care of itself in terms of politics and in terms of financing this, because someone had to finance it. They're the ones who built the boats. They're the ones who built their cities around it. They're the ones that that exploited the indigenous people on the other side of it. Because if it weren't for the indigenous people helping them out, they would have not made it in the first place, and that would have also stunted things automatically. So that's it. That's all I have to say. Pass the mic on.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, brother Tahnko. Thank you, brother Tata, and thank you, brother Louis. So I mean, that was amazing. I mean, everything you guys just said, it was just amazing and a good learning thing. So if brother Tata is okay, I can share the phone number with brother Louis, and if brother Louis is okay, I can share the phone number.
No, he just send him my phone number, and he can contact me through
Okay.
WhatsApp, and I'll send you my email as well too, and he can just go from there.
Okay, definitely. So I'll do that. That's how you reconnect. I'll do that. So
yes, please.
So we open now to questions. I don't. Anyone got a question? Feel free to speak.
I want to ask. I want to ask Brother Lewis, because I'm eager to pick your brain on a lot of things, given your life experience, given your knowledge and your work. In your opinion, what will it take to shift the minds of our people who are still, for lack of a better term, living in ignorance when it comes to our history, and then when it comes to our progression as well? What will it take, in your opinion, to reverse these effects and to basically emancipate our minds as a people?
Yeah, listening to our illustrious last speaker, we missed the boat in several places, and we're at a point now in this country where we're really fighting an uphill battle as we go up against the so-called replacement theory, as we go up against all kinds of different educational oppression, banning books, burning books almost, curriculum that was not being taught, that it slowly began to creep in, is now being removed from curriculum, and getting that information in to young minds early is really essential. We've got a lot of work to do to recoup and recover what we've lost, not just historically, but recently. And as I look at our education system, even where we say that we have control of the curriculum, we aren't doing a hell of a lot to change that. As oftentimes, it's the grassroots efforts, which I was a part of in the 60s and on for civil rights, to get some change. We've got to open our eyes to reclaiming positions on school boards, at City Hall. We focused as a people so much on who's winning the Senate seats and the congressional seats, and what's going on at the national level, that we've lost sight on who's really running the show in our communities. It ain't us. So that's a place where we gotta start. that's about the best I can give you right now. Right off the top of my head, as I'm peeling through what I see going on here today in the U.S. But I will work my fingers to the bone to have this young brother do a Zoom for hopefully nationally our local Georgia chapters. There's a lot to learn. I am really impressed with you also, that you've done your homework. You don't find many African Americans whose roots are actually from Africa, who were born here, who basically take up the mantle to look backwards. Like many of us, they're really trying to escape the history and roots. So a compliment to you for what you're doing. I know the area you're from, and I know that there is some angst about whether we remove those things like slave blocks and auction blocks and slave houses. We got to think about that, because every African American who goes to Africa, they want to see Elmina. They want to go to Cape Coast Slave Castle. When they get to my ancestral village, they want to see Fort Pleasant. They want to see all these places where our people were enslaved. And then you come in and say, no, get rid of all that stuff. We don't want to see it. It brings back, well, can't have it both ways. So I think that, there's some consternation about whether we remove those things. I mean, and let's remember. I mean, we've got the Peace Museum in Alabama about all the lynchings. We have the African American History Museum, the new one that's opening up in Charleston, where a large portion of the enslaved people came into the U.S. Right now on GPB is Henry Louis Gates with Many Rivers Across, and some of those same issues are being discussed. I hope I just staying around long enough, a few more years to keep handing out my opinion. But the difficult thing I see about people like us at my age is that we have these major conferences on African American history, on and on and on. I wish I could see more young people there. It just doesn't happen that often, Our young folks, only if they're probably getting a course at the university or the college. I was at a meeting at the Georgia Archives about a week ago. Well, the Saturday before we did our online Zoom. I doubt if there was anyone in that audience under 50. So we have to do, I don't know how we do it. We got to do more about getting our folks interested. It's kind of like I walk around with a T-shirt on that says "We Out," Harriet Tubman. Unfortunately, most of my young folks couldn't tell you who Harriet Tubman is. That's again, that goes back to the whole process of what's happening in education. So that's about the best I can give you right now. I'm out. Off, Brother Monk. And for the Brother Tahnko, I just got some scrambled eggs and I put some Tabasco sauce on them.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Tahnko, Your question was could you rephrase your question one more time?
Yes, just to put it in different words, what will it take to reverse the effects that were put in place by the mafia, by the transatlantic slave trade, in terms of our people today? What will it take to shift our mindset back to what it'll take to restore us to our glory? Is what does that make sense? For lack of
Okay,
better words.
so okay, then with the ma'afa is in this case what will it take? It will take the majority of people, those that can, to leave. It's not going to happen in the education sector. It's not going to happen in the education sector because it's going to require the Black community to push out educators. At this moment, we're not pushing out educators in this nature right now, not at all. Most are going into the legal profession, if not the protection profession. If not that, then the military profession. If not, they're looking for big bucks. They're going into influencing, these kind of things from there. They're not actually going into what you refer to as education. So the probability that we're going to get enough teachers, male and female, to push this in on a regular basis is decreasing exponentially. The next best place for that to happen would be in the Caribbean or on the continent itself in this case right now. We cannot expect to send our children to the schools and let them teach our children, and then they come out the way that we're thinking they should come out, which is some sort of respectful and pridefulness about their own peoples in this case. Most of us don't even know what it means to be Black. Most of us don't even realize that the only way to path to success, a pathway to success, is knowing your ancestors. Most of us do not know that if you do not know your history, your first name is basically sorry. Okay, we don't know these things, but who's going to teach them is going to be in a community, i.e., a all Black community where Black people have at least 60 to 90% control of the means of production within inside the area. That also means the ways of implementation, along with the ability to pass laws, because the legislature and the legal proceedings are only as good as the people who back them up. And it's your group that backs up these legal proceedings, not just individuals, but the group itself are the ones who keep this in check. They're the ones who make sure that people stay on point. So to ask school districts in Florida, school districts in Omaha, school districts in Nebraska, school districts in California to teach this is going to be tremendously difficult. Not to mention with the rise of the indigenous people who were already there, they are trying to get themselves up on the front stage of things as it is right now. Okay, then they have many lawsuits, civil lawsuits against cities that have taken their names and using it to make a profit off of things. So to get this, you call it to reverse. It's not going to reverse in this case here. We could say put it in its right perspective, understand what it is, know how to combat it, and then move on from there. But that's going to take both, not just the math of the situation, but also the spirituality of the situation. We've had a couple of talks before, and I am a strong proponent of making Vodun the default spirituality for the majority of people in the diaspora in this way, as a means to say that this is us, this is ours, and this is our ways. That's it. Not saying not to disparage anyone else, but these are our ways. And we have to have a way to stamp that, as in this is us. Okay, then it's something similar with the Japanese. They've got their kimono. Fine, that's their stamp. That's what it is. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It doesn't matter what English you speak or how little English you speak. If you put on a kimono, you know where it comes from. That's the stamp. That's it. We already have that, but we do not implement it. And in terms of our own children right now, the next best thing is to get them outside the states as soon as one can. The next best option after that is to put them into a school where it's 95 Black teachers. The next best thing after that is just to homeschool them. All right, that's just it. Because if not, we already have enough to deal with as it is. I mean, we're talking about trying to re-educate our students, and what about the parents who are just trying to make sure that their kids come home in the afternoon? Because some Onyibo decided to go and buy a whole bunch of stuff that he didn't need and go do things that, you know what I'm talking about, to these schools, and all of a sudden now there it is. So if we're going to do this, and which some of us are, it's just time to get out the best way we can. That's there it is. Now, is this happening? Yes, it is happening in many different fronts. It is starting to happen. Portugal is one of the places where it's happening right now. There seems to be a growing amount of Blacks coming out of the Americas, moving into Portugal to get out of the States. Those that can, with remote working and so forth, they're doing it. Not all of us can, because some of us are in professions that do not have that sort of thing for remote working. But does that make sense to you? So in terms of education, that would say that we would have to be in control of legislation and control of implementation if that is going to be a successful outcome.
Thank you. Go Pano, absolutely. Brother Monkey, your hand is up. That's all. You're muted.
Oh yeah. So again, I'm gonna say thank you for everything, for the clarification, everything. I'm glad that while we was going through the whole presentation, we used the word enslave instead of slave, because the word we use are very powerful, especially for the youngest one coming after us. So saying that, you know, our ancestor was enslaved, that gave them a little bit more vision of what happened. But when the word slave, as we can see on the movies, like you say, you know, the white man whipping the black, when they use that word slave, they still think that their ancestor was slave even when they left home. You know, there was people, you know, professional doctors and everything, and then they got enslaved. So that's what I want to add. So, you know, that's a powerful word, and I'm glad that we using that word instead of using slave. My second question, really, I think it could be Brother Tata and yourself. I was looking at a deal of research trying to find out what was the name, Cameroon name as a country before it was called Rio dos Camarones. I don't know if any of you actually found anything in that sense. What was the name of Cameroon before?
I will give a thing on that one. That would have been part of the Congo Kingdom with
Okay.
a K.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, that that region, that area that we refer to now
Okay.
as Cameroon, that would have been, if you think about that, that would have been part of the Congo Kingdom with the K.
Okay.
Because I say that because of the cult of the skull.
Mhm.
All right, when I'm speaking with Dr. Lualuka, that's coming out of Kinshasa, and we're having our talks on the African traditional spiritual system, and when I looked into the cult of the skull itself, the line that connects them it's too similar, and the similarities are more than the differences, because the end result the end outcome is the same thing basically. Now, what he was saying to me is that in the Bakongo tradition, it is not necessary to have that that skull as a because it's a representation. He said you can. He said it's like you're using tricycles on the riding the bicycle with the training wheels. You could liken that the cult of the cult of the skull is like the training wheels to a certain degree. You still get to where you're going to, but you need that the skull as a focal point. At some point in time, you may not need the skull anymore. And he said that is where the rest of it picks up at. So he understood this because when he went into Cameroon, he was talking about that. They were surprised that he knew exactly what they were talking about because these things were more or less consistent. So you could say that at least based on the spiritual aspect, these parts were part of the kingdom of Congo, at least part of this area that is considered Cameroon.
Okay.
And if you look at the west part, that could be considered to some degree part of that kingdom in that area, which is now considered Nigeria.
Okay. So if I understand, at that time, we was actually identified as kingdom, not as a country. And then
No, there was no such. No, there was no such. The concept of a nation state didn't come into existence until well into the, oh shoot, what, the 1700s, just about, when you're now having the state of Italy. German unification didn't even come in into the late 1800s. That's before the Berlin Conference in 1894-95. So German unification as a state, as in what is a Staat, what is a nation, that concept didn't really get born until much later. Before that time period, we had our kingdoms, our fiefdoms, or or chiefdoms in this case here, but not feudalism. We never had feudalism. Feudalism is basically slavery, European style. Okay, then that's essentially what feudalism is. It's their own version of slavery, like literally slavery, not as enslaved as in if I work and I do well, I can marry the king's daughter or the lord's daughter, and I can upgrade. You can never do that in feudalism, not like that, unless the king came down to choose the girl from the peasantry. In this case, we've had too many stories where a man was captured or was made to work for another king. He proved himself dutiful, and as a result, he rose up in position and in title, and then was entitled or had the allowance to marry someone else of that same thing, coming from a different background. There's too many stories throughout the continent with this. It isn't just unique to the Bamileke. So this would have been part of kingdoms, is what I'm saying to you. Kingdoms, chiefdoms in this case, geographical areas that were loosely done through commercial trade.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I think that clarified my question. I'm sorry my camera is not on. I ain't got enough light on where I'm at the moment. Yeah.
I believe our sister Glenda had something to say. Or not. Well, yes, but that's all I wanted to present for today. Definitely thank you all for coming in and sharing your thoughts. Does anyone else have any final thoughts that they would like to share on these topics?
I just want to say, Brother Justin, I love your picture on the background. You should just bring back the beer.
Yeah, you like that one? Yeah, my wife picked that one out.
You should just bring back the beer. Let the beer grow. That's all.
Yes, sir. And add another baby.
Add another baby, exactly. Add the youngest one. It's a lovely portrait. Very, very lovely.
Mercy. So that's all I have, brother. We can close if you would like.
Can I share my screen real quick, just briefly?
Yes,
absolutely. Please do.
All right then. All right, does everyone see this right here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then. All right. If you can, as you can see, you've got the Democratic Republic of Congo right there, the DRC. You've got Congo, you've got Gabon, you've got Equatorial Guinea, and then right next door to it, you've got Cameroon. There it is. You've got your CAF right there, and your Democratic Republic of Congo was also holding Angola as well, Central African Republic, and in parts of Cameroon, if you can see that, because here's your Congo right there, which is your there's your Kinshasa, which is sitting there. And as you keep on going over to the left, you've got Libreville, you've got Equatorial Guinea, and then you've got this area, there's Yaoundé. It's not that you in terms of kingdom wise, this is just one large area.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. So that's where the queen of that area used to be Queen Zinga in Angola. She used to rule that.
Down, yes, this will be the area that she was in.
Yeah.
I'm thinking somewhere next to Luanda in this area.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And we're gonna let Brother Tahnko completely close it, and then we finish everything now.
All right.
We go ahead and close it.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for just your time and your attention. And I look forward to speaking with you all next week if we have something next week. But everyone take care, stay safe, have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.